Hi, this is Mimi.
And this is Lee, and this is Getting Rich After Divorce.
We're two divorced women who decided the best way to get rich was to embrace our entrepreneurial spirits and build our own business.
To us, rich means the money in your bank account, but also the quality of your life, your experiences, and your personal well-being.
You're here to overcome doubt, fear, burnout, and finally get unstuck to build a business you love and makes you rich.
You also want to learn how to do all of this while navigating the challenges divorced women face. If that's you, stick with us. You're in the right place.
Hi, this is Mimi.
And this is Lee. And in this episode of Getting Rich After Divorce, we talk about why social media can feel so scary to divorced women.
Yeah, this is a big topic. And I think it's fascinating. I tend not to think about social media a lot. So when Lee and I started our business and this series about body image and being the face of your business and being on social media, we've been doing a lot of research and contemplation and talking to each other a lot about this idea of what is it about social media that feels both necessary and scary, and as a divorced woman, how are those feelings exasperated?
Exactly. So, we did want to point out that social media can feel scary to everyone. I almost everyone I know, it's hard for me to even think. Maybe there are people and I'm just not thinking of them, but it just seems like everyone who wants to comment about social media, what they say is stuff like, I hate Facebook, or I go on Instagram just to look at my kids' photos, or whatever, but they're always creating this stance of, I don't love it and I don't like being there. And maybe I feel like I have to go there. Maybe I just stay away from it. But it seems like everyone, regardless of divorce, regardless of age or gender or preference or whatever, has this sort of standoffish thing. So, we just want you to know it's very normal. It's not like just divorced women suffer from this, but there is a special heightened sense of being in a fishbowl sometimes, when you're going through something suddenly very traumatic and hard that feels maybe even a little bit shameful, embarrassing. You don't want to say anything that would hurt your kids. There's just all this stuff where you're worried. There are all these worries and fears, which we'll get into, but it is heightened around the time of divorce, or can be.
Yeah, and I loved your post. I mean, your email, Lee, about and if you're not on an email list, you missed a beautiful one that Lee sent out a day or two ago, and it talks about like the Facebook of yesteryear, where we look back on the innocence of what Facebook was when it started. And I think it's like we talk about Facebook a lot because that's what we're on the most. It's what most businesses that are similar to ours that have an online business use, as opposed to, like TikTok or Instagram or some of the other hipper ones. It's the one that's most relevant to us and our business. And if you're looking to start an online business, it will probably carry a little more importance for you as a business tool. But it does seem that it's a reflection of what's going on in the larger society. So I just wanted to give you a shout out that I love that email that you shared. And it really made me reflect back on what I thought and felt about Facebook when I first learned about it 10 years ago versus now. And I'm not a big social media person. I don't post a lot. I don't, I'm not like a scroller. That's not one of my time wasters or a way that I buffer is through social media, though I know a lot of people do. And I know that for the younger generation, it really are a lot of heavy and hard negative things that are coming from overuse of social media. But we want to talk about why you, as a divorced woman, might feel like, we call it like cringeworthy when you think about being on social media.
Right. And just a very brief thumbnail sketch of what I said in the email is that when I first got onto Facebook, it was somewhere in the early 2000s. I mean, it's like 2007. I don't even know, maybe 2007-ish. I'm guessing because I haven't looked at the actual date, but around in there, I was still married, I had 3 kids that were still like, I was driving them to soccer and swim meets and all that stuff. And it was kind of a happy, very busy time of life where, I'm still sending out the holiday cards with the whole family pictured somewhere, and it's that kind of feeling. It was that kind of feeling for me. And suddenly, there's Facebook and I'm getting contacted by these old friends, people I didn't even know if they were alive or dead. And they're like, hey, it just felt like a big party. And then, a few years later, 3, 4, 5 years later, they were always getting divorced. And suddenly it felt very different. It did not feel friendly and fun and like a party. It suddenly felt very different. And that, most people can identify with when things aren't going well in your life. And suddenly there you are from that vantage point, looking at all the family photos, all the vacation photos, all the happy anniversary photos that people share on Facebook, which they have a total right to. And, these are couples I love. So on one hand, you love these couples, you're glad they're together. On the other hand, you're just so aware of where you are, and suddenly there's that sense of I'm not like them or they're not like me. And I don't even feel like I can share, my life right now, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's so many fears that people have, depending on your situation, depending on your ex and your situation. There's so many different kinds of fears that are often very legitimate.
Yeah, let's talk about one of those. I think one that's super common for women is the fear of judgment.
Yeah.
I mean, I think when my marriage was falling apart, I already was trying to create a facade of okayness.
Mhm.
Right. And so I think to add, if I posted anything about, what my life was like on social media, it felt false and untrue because inside everything was crumbling. And I was like, I don't want to post anything that feels really real because then people are going to judge me. They're going to know that somehow I'm failing. I had so much guilt and shame around the marriage falling apart. And the
Mm.
last thing I wanted was to have everybody else that I knew make a judgment or have a thought about it.
Yeah. And I'm thinking about what was most painful. We've talked about this in other programs we've had too, because we've had divorce programs just for like getting over divorce. And one of the things that was really painful, and I don't know why it was so painful, that would be like maybe a whole other podcast, but I didn't want pity. I didn't want people to suddenly just be like, oh, I don't know what I wanted. I wanted empathy and compassion and a space to be with people, but I didn't want people to be like, oh, I feel so bad for, like I didn't want pity. And that was also, I was scared of getting pitied. I
Yeah.
don't know what that's about, but it just felt like it was like nails on a chalkboard. It wasn't the thing that I needed. And that's an interesting psychological thing that we could probably discuss forever, but I just remember that very distinctly.
Yeah. And then you feel like you had to defend you and your
Mhm.
decision to move forward with the divorce. If it
Absolutely.
was your decision to do that, or um, somehow, so so many women are blindsided by the divorce. So you don't want to have to come forth with, how could you have been so naive? How could you not have seen it? Like those are the comments that we hear a lot. So I think, for divorced women, it's like what to post and how to post is scary because you don't want other people making a judgment call on what you've done.
Yeah, and that's a double-sided coin there, and there are probably many other facets. It's probably just not a two sides. There's like many faceted responses you're going to get from people, and you don't. It's a gamble. You don't know what it will be, and so in your head you can build it up to be really, really bad. Like people are going to think this about me. They're going to think that about me. They're going to view me this way. And so in your head, it can feel like a really scary neighborhood at night. And yet, what people actually think could be very different. But there is the reality that they're going to be those people who are like, marriage is sacred and you should not, break the bond. And they, in your group of 400 friends, or even if you've got like 50 or 100 friends, there's always that one relative, who's like, marriage is a compact between a man and a woman. And, that's the last thing you need when you're getting a divorce. That is just not helpful. Or, you just never know. There are those people who just make bizarre comments, and it's hard you can't defend in advance. So what a lot of women do is they just don't make any, they just keep, suddenly they're under a rock and they're hiding.
Yeah. I mean, to think, just to say that, like, that's one of the fears, right? Is that you're going to be, it's like with the judgment also comes harassment. I mean, the fact that they have names now like cyberbullies and trolls and stuff for these people that just post negatively, and they don't necessarily know your situation. This whole idea of how Facebook posts gets, from one person to the next person, can go really far. So I think it's that idea that not only are they going to judge me, they're going to like comment and make me feel even worse and say negative stuff to me.
Exactly. And unfortunately, these fears are based on some truth. There are these truths out there. It can be a place where you're not always safe. And there's kind of swinging to the other side sometimes. And I did a little of this too, just on occasion, where I would overshare, not so much about the divorce or anything, but suddenly I would feel like I had overshared. And maybe I didn't even really overshare, but compared to hiding under a rock and just not being seen and then suddenly saying something, suddenly it felt like oversharing. I'm not even going to make the judgment about myself that I did. But then, some people do overshare, as that's their emotional reaction to what's going on, and they just need support. They're just looking for understanding or something, some kind of connection, and so they overshare. But then there's the ramification of, is there going to be some kind of consequence, or are you just going to be kind of regret that you did that? I mean, you can erase Facebook posts. Luckily for you, for all of us, we can erase the posts. That there's that also. Either you do overshare and then you're like, I wish I hadn't done that, or you overshare and you're not aware that you're oversharing.
I wonder if that oversharing can be kind of like an overcompensated, like, I could see, like doing something really fun. And it's like, oh my God, I got to put this on Facebook so people know I'm okay. It's like really like, I want to.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of another way to say oversharing, because it sounds, just that phrase sounds judgmental, like you've gone overboard or you're too much. But it is kind of a reaction. It's like nervous talking, like when you're nervous and you just start talking, you can't seem to stop yourself and all the words keep coming out. So it's not like you're bad or you did something embarrassing. It's just like a reaction we have to a very uncomfortable situation. And so when I say oversharing, I'm not judging you, because I nervous talk too, and it's just, so I don't want you to think that I'm judging you if you hear that phrase and you're like, oh yeah, I've done that, and now they're going to think I'm bad. I don't think that at all.
Yeah, and I wonder, Lee, if it's because when you're going through the dissolution of the marriage and the divorce process and what that can look like, you're being told by your lawyers and your friends, like, don't post too much on social media. You don't want to give any ammunition. So I wonder if part of this fear and why social media feels so scary for divorced women is a continuation of that, all that warning and dread and, comments that were built during the process. It's like, okay, like when is it time? When is it time not to be afraid and not to worry about the repercussions?
Right. And there's so many different situations. There are some women, I want to preface what I'm about to say with this other thing. We fully recognize and have worked with women who have scary, scary soon-to-be exes and violent situations. You absolutely need to listen to experts, to policemen, to lawyers, to women's shelter, take the advice and stick with it closely when you're in a definitely scary situation. You want to do everything you can, including restraining orders. The vast majority of the time, or I don't know if I say vast, but the larger percentage of the time, you're just dealing with a lot of emotions, heightened emotions. People aren't at their best. You know, I don't know what percentage of states now. I used to know this factoid. We could quickly look it up, but no fault divorce is the most common kind of divorce situation in most states. I'm sorry I don't have that factoid. I should rememorize that, but that's the direction of family law. I mean, there are some holdover states where you're gonna somehow in the family law system get dinged for dating too soon. Somehow they're reaching into your private life and determining that even though you've been separated for 2 years, you can't date or talk to men, or talk to whoever you want to date, or dating, whoever you're interested in. But and so possibly depending on your state, you also do need to be careful. But I think attorneys can scare the bejesus out of you by making you fear that any information could be used against you. I just don't think that's the way it should be. And of course, depending on the state, it might actually be that way. But I always hate it when institutions make you feel like you need to live in fear. And because we're already scared. Everyone's already scared of social media. And it can do damaging things, but I just hate it for divorced women and men that you just have to live in fear even more. It's just kind of a sad thing.
Yeah, I know I've talked to women that were like, I didn't even want to post that I was going on a vacation, or, oh, look at this new jacket I got. Anything that, implied that they were spending money, because financials is such a big one. So I think that has a lot to deal with. And does that carry over even after your divorce is finished? Maybe.
I would guess that it does, because whenever you have a traumatic event and all this fear is picked up and you've learned there are all these new fears you should have, like, oh, what? I'm not allowed to buy a new coat. Suddenly it's winter. I need a coat, come on. But suddenly that's a bad thing. It's labeled a bad thing, which was ridiculous. But, can be used against you if you have, an ex-spouse who wants to make it an issue. That's traumatic. It's a type of traumatizing where suddenly you're made to feel very fearful. It's hard to just release that and get over it. So I think, Mimi, you're right. I think it can just kind of stay with you. It can stay with you. I know it stayed with me. Yeah.
Yeah. And we just are bringing these up so that you can start to understand what your thoughts and your emotions are about why it feels scary. So we want to just present like a plethora of reasons and know that a lot of these are for women that aren't even divorced, right? Like these are the fear of being judged or harassed or oversharing. These are common fears, concerns about social media. It just is with most things elevated, when you're divorced or post-divorce.
Yeah, suddenly it just can feel very different.
Because everybody's got an opinion, right?
Right. Everyone's got an opinion. And sometimes they'll share it with you.
Yeah.
On your Facebook.
Yeah. And I can remember trying to, sort of move on. The marriage is over. I'm trying to, like, what's going to be next? What's my next chapter going to look like? And then I was afraid if I posted on that, like, what are my children going to see? What are their family's parents going to think if, I intimate that I'm going on a vacation or I'm going to date or, I'm out with friends, they're going to think, oh, this is too soon. Like, who does she think she is? And they're going to have opinions, if I've moved on too soon, or the opposite, if I'm not doing anything, like, you need to get out there.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you can't win. So I think the divorce process and moving through it and getting to post-divorce, your second chapter, that's why it's such a beautiful time to really start to find your own internal compass and strength and just decide, I think this is right. I'm allowed to buy a damn coat if it's winter time, and I don't care if somebody thinks it's spending money, or I deserve to go on vacation. This is how I spend time with my kids. It's totally, took vacations before. Why can't I take them now? And I'm just going to ignore, like, maybe people will think something about that. Maybe they will make weird remarks, but I've got to live by my own sense of what's right for me, and not everybody's going to be in agreement. And so it's definitely a time where there's like this crucible effect where you get rid of maybe not all, but at least some of that thinking about what other people think. You kind of just have to toss it out because it's too much. You can't carry that much worry and deal with life as, potentially a single mom or just in a stressful situation. You got to toss out some things that you used to worry about. And worrying what other people think is going to eventually be one of them. But it's a tough adjustment at first.
Yeah. And what I like that, Lee. And I think part of the reason that if social media feels super scary, it might be a hint that you haven't done some of that work, right? That you still are in the healing process and you still are trying to figure out what your next chapter might look like. So if you're in, and that process, let me tell you, can take any amount of time, right? Like, I know for me, I was like, why is this still a problem? And that was like a year out, 2 years, 3 years out. We work with women and they're like, I'm 5 years out, I'm 6, like everybody's timeline is different. So if you're still feeling so cringy and so scary about sharing anything on social media, like that might be a clue. Maybe this is trying to tell me something. Maybe it's some healing, because I think the more healed you get and the more confident you feel about what you're doing and who you are and the direction that you're moving and this beautiful next chapter that you're creating, the more comfortable it will feel to share it. So I think part of the reason it feels scary is because you're still unsure. There's still some work to be done there.
Yeah. And we kind of operate from a premise that our whole lives are an evolution. Like, thank goodness too. Who wants to stay stuck and stagnant and always be the same? But you evolve by sometimes being uncomfortable. So it is a great opportunity if you can kind of reframe some of the pain, any pain you might feel. And this will become important. We're going to do another podcast on how you segue from all this discomfort with social media. How do you then use it with all this, latent kind of, latent remnant discomfort, even if you've healed somewhat? Like we were saying, it's traumatic, so it kind of sticks to you a little bit more. How do you then segue into using it for your business? Which that's a whole other topic. So we're going to talk about that in our next podcast. But you're here listening to this because presumably you want to start a business, but we wanted to dedicate a whole podcast to, this is one of the number one fears new businesswomen feel, regardless of divorce or not, is the fear of using social media, being exposed on social media. What will my friends think? What will my family think? Will I get trolled comments, blah, 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 blah. But then you add the divorce layer to that, where it adds this whole new way of looking at social media, and then hanging out there. It's recognizing, as Mimi said, because the key to moving through anything and evolving through anything is first you got to recognize it. Number one coaching tip. First, you've got to see what's happening. Then you've got to normalize it. It's not just you. It's not just me. It wasn't just Mimi. This is so common. So try to depersonalize it. Try to understand that it's not just you're a person who feels very uncomfortable on Facebook and therefore you can never have a normal relationship with it. It's a pandemic. It's a pandemic response to social media. So all of us feel this way. So try to understand that even though it feels very a certain way for you, it's not just you, and it doesn't make you a certain way. And it doesn't mean you can't then reframe how you approach it. I think once you realize this is everyone is kind of there's a social thing that everyone feels, you can depersonalize and normalize it to a degree, whatever feels right for you.
Yeah, to a degree.
Mhm.
And I just was sitting here thinking too that pre-divorce, you're posting from this bubble of being a wife, a couple. If you have kids, often your posts revolve around the family. And post-divorce, your posting has this newly single woman on the internet, and you're still trying to figure out who that is and who you are in this role and how do you post. Obviously, if you have kids, you're still posting about your kids, and if you vacation, it's not like all of that goes away, but you are a different person
Yes.
in the social media realm of, are you single? Is it separated? What's your relationship status? It's a little bit different. So I think we just, like Lee was saying, the reason it's scary is because it really is kind of scary. It's not like it's okay to think that this
Yeah,
is scary, that this is cringeworthy.
yeah.
And it's okay if you're like, I'm so proud of what I've done and I've emerged from this like a boss, and I'm just ready to put it out there. I think it's just a time to be real intentional about why you're posting, what you want your post to say, and is it okay if you don't post at all? I think it's just the purpose of this podcast is really just to start thinking about it, to normalize that you are not the only person sitting in front of your computer or on your phone trying to answer those questions.
Exactly. Just know that you're in really, really, really good company with millions and millions and millions of other people. But, definitely all the divorced women out there, you're in really good company, and you are completely normal and sitting in a normal emotional thought space. And, what we do want to point out is you don't have to stay stuck there. Mimi and I have found various ways to keep moving on with the social media because we use it in our business. Again, we'll talk about that in the next podcast, but even personally, I found if I was totally away from it, then I missed some key events like people's parents dying. Like there's a certain amount of touching base that I actually do want to do. It's a way to just be human and connected in a human way at a very high level, even just to wish people happy birthday. That's my favorite feature about Facebook personally, is just that it tells me when people's birthdays are. And being the age that I am, people's parents are starting to die or have been, we're just in a time of life when that's starting to happen to people, and I want to be there for people. So, you find a way to move through your own discomfort eventually, and there's no timeline that's right about that. I think it took me a solid 3 to 5 years to start feeling even halfway normal about how I fit into the world. And so there's no time frame that's right or wrong. But it is important to, in addition to knowing this is so normal and there's nothing wrong with you, that you can evolve and not stay stagnant and stuck. Like because I'm hiding now, I have to permanently hide. Because I feel uncomfortable now, I can never use social media. I think those kind of stances you want to guard against, those kind of knee-jerk reactions. They're just coming from a fear that you have right at the moment. But you can evolve, and even in your personal use of it, I feel like I've evolved through it too. And I still don't like posting about myself, but sometimes I do.
That's great. So if it's tough for personal, you can imagine what happens when you add your business
Yeah.
on. And we'll be sharing that podcast next week. So stay
Yeah,
tuned.
stay tuned. We'll see you later.
We'll see ya. Thank you for listening to Getting Rich After Divorce. We're so happy you were here. We truly value each and every one of you.
Yes, we sure do. And be sure to subscribe to us wherever you're catching us, whether it's on, through a podcast platform or on YouTube, please subscribe and give us a 5-star rating if you feel you deserve that. And join our community so you get updates and stick with us.